Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the sophomore album from Charlie Puth called Voicenotes. So the last time I talked about Charlie Puth, it did not go well in the slightest. Now that review of 9-Track Mind, it was a collaborative review with John over at ARTV, and to say we tore into that album would be underselling it. The vocal delivery was utterly unconvincing, the production was painfully flimsy and homegrown, and the less we say about the underweight milquetoast lyrics on that project, which are at best, the better. And yet what caught me off guard was how it wasn't just John and I calling that record out. Indeed, the negative critical reception for 9-Track Mind was among some of the harshest that I had ever seen. The sort of thorough panning that mainstream music critics rarely ever deliver. And yet, maybe Charlie Puth took some of that criticism to heart, and from the lead-off single Attention, I started getting the impression that Voicenotes might be a very different animal, especially when Charlie Puth described his primary influences to be late 80s R&B, New Edition, and New Jack Swing. And if you told me that 2 years ago, I probably would have laughed in your face. I mean, come on. The guy who wrote Let's Marvin Gaye and Get It On with Meghan Trainor is calling back to that era of R&B. But then again, Attention did have that groove. And when you factor in rumors suggesting that 9-Track Mind was pushed in a very different direction than what Charlie Puth wanted, towards a more clean pop sound, well, it would make a lot of sense, but I wanted hard evidence before I could buy into it completely. So, alright, fine. What do we get on Voicenotes? Well, here's the thing. Voicenotes is indeed a pretty significant improvement from 9-Track Mind in pretty much every way. The choice of sounds and styles are more distinct and showcase a pop artist who actually could have some real potential on the road, tastefully updating older sounds for a modern audience, and with some of the best hooks that Charlie Puth has ever brought to the table. Now that said, I will fully acknowledge that at least part of my appreciation is rooted in nostalgia for some of the sounds that Puth is resurrecting and some of the sounds he's not choosing to embrace, and that he does have a ways to go before he truly wins me over. This is a decent project, but not really a great one. So alright, let's start off with the biggest weak point of the record, Charlie Puth himself. Now I'll freely admit I've never really been fond of his vocal tone, but Voicenotes does allow him to add layers of darker complexity on songs like Attention and Done For Me with Kehlani, and when his multi-tracking is on point, he's actually capable of singing opposite Boyz II Men of all people on If You Leave Me Now, which interpolates an old Chicago song that actually Boyz II Men covered into something that's genuinely really great. It's a cappella, it sounds really good. He doesn't exactly have a lot of range or vocal texture to bring in a lot of smolder, and his choice to spend more time with his thin falsetto is not a great lane for him, especially when he tries to interject a vibrato for more texture, and it feels both forced and unnecessary and reminding me of Post Malone in a bad way, but overall he's not bad. Now granted, I'm not surprised he's trying to push his vocal range into more challenging or interesting territory, and this ties into the compositions and production. And you know what? I'm going to give Charlie Puth points right out of the gate here for mostly sticking to his plan to embrace more groove-driven R&B tunes. From swaggering bass lines, the glistening keyboards, and the acoustic tones that are a lot more tinny than they really should be. But that's of course because Charlie Puth once again produced the entire project himself, with less live instrumentation than you might expect. Seriously, even that bass groove on Attention, that was created with presets on a computer, which might explain why a fair few of these progressions, especially in the percussion, they feel a lot stiffer than they probably should. And while I get that Charlie Puth probably had to make this album on a shoestring budget, given how badly 9-Track Mind was panned, and labels do care about that sort of thing, the more computerized instruments, they do wind up feeling a little bit flatter than what they could have had from organic counterparts. And Charlie Puth still has a bad habit of leaving his acoustic guitars devoid of any sort of warmth or texture. And yet, you know what? It doesn't quite bother me as much this time around, mostly because of the eras where Charlie Puth is drawing from some of his sound. Now the first I've referenced is late 80s R&B, and between that great choppy riff that opens up The Way I Am, the synth bass of Done For Me, the talk box and the sharper synth groove of Slow It Down that I really liked, and the acoustic guitar keyboard balance of Somebody Told Me, they're all really solid calling back to that era in time. But the other main stylistic influence for Charlie Puth, and I should have seen this one coming, is mid to late 90s boy band R&B. Think the first two Backstreet Boys albums, the self-titled one and Backstreet's Back. And between the wiry groove of LA Girls, How Much Patience sounds like All I Have to Give crossed with Thinking Out Loud, and the fact that he literally got Boyz II Men for an a cappella song. Look, I'm not complaining because the grooves are tight and I really like the sound, but it is pretty blatant, down to the key changes that you get on If You Leave Me Now and Through It All. Now granted, when you compare it to the slightly more modern grooves like Boy and Empty Cuts, I do personally prefer the more more melodic old school grooves. But even on those songs, Charlie Puth's commitment to more of those melodic grooves is decidedly old school and honestly in a good way. There's not a desaturated trap banger on this project, and I'm perfectly fine with that. And I just wish his songwriting was on the same level. Now again, to Charlie Puth's credit, if we're playing in lightweight boy band territory, I've got no issue with the deflecting hookups of Slow It Down, or how he has the cheating confrontations of How Long or Somebody Told Me, or even LA Girls, even if Charlie Puth can definitely come across as a little tactless on that song. And while I'm still not entirely convinced he can sell the more angry or defiant tracks like The Way I Am or Attention, he's a little bit too willowy in his vocal timbre, but they've got some of the attitude to click for that audience, especially when a few songs later, Kehlani is more than his match slapping down his accusations of her cheating on Done For Me. But to put it mildly, Charlie Puth is not a subtle songwriter, and his bluntness can definitely lead to some misfires. At the most inoffensive, we get Patient, where he pleads for this girl to give him more time, or how he describes coming out through all his struggles on Through It All, though there's not a lot of convincing detail about said struggles, but you know, struggles. They're real, apparently. But what I had a fair bit less patience for was a song like Boy, where he angrily questions an older woman who isn't really into a relationship with him by asserting that he is clearly giving her what she wants, and he was born in the 90s. Okay, dude, take it from me. When you call attention to your age with respect to hers when you're dating an older woman, you're not helping yourself. And then he follows it up by talking about dating an insatiable younger girl. Doesn't help you in the progression of this album either. And then there's Change, a duet with one of Charlie Puth's longtime heroes, singer-songwriter from the 70s, James Taylor. And it plays in schmaltzy, let's all get along territory. Again, the song's harmless in a vacuum, but man, it feels kind of tactless coming out right now, especially given that it's Charlie Puth's only venture into this territory on the album. It just feels a little out of place. But as a whole, if there was a record to pull Charlie Puth out of his tailspin from 9-Track Mind, Voicenotes is definitely it. The grooves are sharper, the writing and performances, they are a little better, and with songs like Done For Me, If You Leave Me Now, Slow It Down, and Somebody Told Me, he's got some pretty solid pop R&B songs that could be great singles, if a little bit basic overall. I do worry that we're not going to see any greater complexity or production quality outside of Charlie Puth's laptop, but again, baby steps, and this is going in the right direction at least. For me, solid 6 out of 10, definitely recommended for the fans, and it's not a bad pop record to hear otherwise. It's not great, again, but absolutely an improvement. And given how much the radio seems to adore him, yeah, with some of these cuts, I'll be willing to get on board. Check this out. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. Like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. I know I'm more surprised that I'm a little bit as positive on this as I was, but hey, it happens. When it gets better, it gets better. It gets good grooves, it gets good grooves. But with your opinion, polls up there if you all want to tell me how I'm not as hard on this as I should be, or perhaps I was too hard on it. But hey, if you want to buy it, link down there below. If there's anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. And if there's anything you guys want to do to get involved in supporting this channel or helping my scheduling process, link to my Patreon is right over there, where 3 times a week patrons get to vote on my schedule, and once a week for the higher tier contributors, you guys get to add albums, movies, or even the top 10 list to that schedule. More details right over there. If you want to see my schedule, it's linked to my Instagram down there below. But until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.